Being busy is not an excuse. Exhaustion is also not an excuse because I am tired. I'm very busy, but my brand always comes first. When we scroll too much, it sort of poisons our creativity as well and what we actually want to post.
I'm a busy marketer, but I really do want to be active on social. I want to explore being a creator. Where would you advise that they start?
If the passion is not there, you're not going to do anything. That's the truth, because it's so easy to procrastinate for yourself. Be the creator. People are trying to consume. Don't consume until you've mastered the art of creating for yourself without comparing.
Hello, and welcome to South Africa Tech Marketers, where I uncover the journeys of marketers who are thriving in South Africa and beyond in the hope of helping you do the same. My name is Kirsty Lang. I'm a senior content writer working remotely in Cape Town, and today's guest is someone who is absolutely nailing the balance between creator and strategists. From working with brands like Fashion Nova and Bolt to growing her own audience of over 90,000 followers on Instagram and 15,000 on TikTok, probably more by the time this episode comes out, she has built something that is both deeply creative and strategic. But before we dive in, a quick shout out to our sponsor, the Global Talent Company. If you're a South African marketer looking to land your dream remote role, or you are hiring and want to tap into top tier talent, definitely check out the Global Talent Code. The link is in the show notes. So, with me today is Palesa Ramafola, a social media and marketing coordinator, a content creator, brand ambassador, strategist, and speaker. Palesa, welcome. I'm so happy to have you in my studio today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirsty. I know it sounded like, okay, she's doing a lot of creative stuff, 100%. I'll also just add, I'm also on YouTube. I think that's where the journey started, actually.
But oh my gosh, Okay, so I went deep on your socials. I somehow skipped YouTube entirely. I was just obsessed with your Instagram for a good 30 minutes when I was looking at your profile. So, okay, we have to talk about YouTube as well because I'm also creating for YouTube and it's really hard and I need to learn from you. Okay, I've got so many questions for you. So on that note, let's kind of start with what I'm most curious about is how you built your audiences. I would love to know the story of how you built such a strong personal brand across platforms.
Right. So this actually has to go back to YouTube, our little white elephant in the room. And I say white elephant because I'm not as consistent on there right now. So it was really a random and sporadic thing. So it wasn't, a meticulous and well-calculated thing. It kind of just happened. And I think the biggest thing, now that I actually have the terminology to put to what I was doing, because back then, this is about 6 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I think I was just doing what everybody was doing, just posting for not even for the likes, really. I was actually influenced by my, at the time, 11-year-old brother who said, I think you should put that video on YouTube. And I was like, what's YouTube? Yes, I had no cooking clue what YouTube was. And so that's actually it's really crazy. And so I think it started there. And the nature of the video I was posting at the time was actually my matric dance, right? And this is because I had this bad habit of losing my phone. And I had footage. So I said, I need to keep this somewhere. He said, YouTube. And so I just put that on there. And I guess given the nature of that video, it had 100% to do with me, right? And the chapter of my life at the time. So I think what then happened at the time, it did go viral for, virality at its peak in 2017, 18, 19 time. And around that time, I guess the people who gravitated towards that content ended up being my community. And because I had no idea what I was doing, I was just posting about myself, so people could get to know who exactly is that girl in that pink dress from that video that you all know about, right? Mm-hmm. So it was just talk about what you're doing and what you're into and just highlighting everything about myself. And so today, I can actually reflect back and say it was authenticity that built the brand, just being true to self, in other words, and not rounding off to everything that you're seeing across platform and now with the algorithm as well. And just succumbing to the pressure of wanting to create like others, just being yourself. Quite honestly, that's where it all started. And I think it's what still keeps me grounded today, just being authentic in the brand and the right people, thank you algorithm, coming your way.
I love that. That is such a cool story. And the note about authenticity, I was literally having a conversation with someone about this today. I came across like a random guy on TikTok and he was making such great content. And I was like, this guy's going completely viral, but he's some dude in a bucky, with his like, I have no other way of explaining it, like his like safari shirt. And it was just so authentic and like surprising. And I think that for me, it was like, what is it about this person? And that is it, because it's just not contrived, right? And everything on social at the moment feels so, I don't know. I kind of like when I'm scrolling at the moment, I'm like, are you telling me the truth or are you selling me something?
Yep.
And I love that. That is such a cornerstone of your journey. So from your YouTube, you started building a following there and then you kind of branched out into other platforms. Is that how it happened?
I think actually the story started on YouTube where I was more authentic. And I think it's easier to connect with at the time YouTube because we weren't really TikTokers in SA back in, the 2016 to 19 period. I think TikTok really took off during the COVID-19 lockdown here in SA. So before that, our video platform was YouTube, and I think I was more comfortable with that platform also because you get to speak on there, in comparison with still posts like Instagram at the time. And it wasn't as advanced as what it is right now. So I would just be posting pictures really on Instagram, but I had a deeper connection with YouTube. But I noticed that the Instagram took off much quicker than the YouTube. And I cannot really tell you why. I don't know why. There was no recipe that I was using. I guess I was just creating for myself at the time and just everything I was doing. And I was just always into aesthetics. I think that's another thing that, Instagram, the aesthetic platform, that's possibly where that direction also came from. But I was just storytelling my real story. And of course, as time went on, you had the COVID-19 lockdown. And then, of course, you had platforms like TikTok that just went boom, viral, like what it currently does today, make things go viral. And I remember just saying, I will never join TikTok. It's bad. I was actually on that side. I was like, no, I'm not going to join TikTok. No, especially because it was brain rot to me because we just sitting at home and scrolling and doing a bunch of challenges. And so I told myself, I'm not going to do it. And ironically, then when I pursued my honors, my study was on TikTok. And I think even now in my master's, yes, right? It's like, oh, you actually like TikTok? But I think the reason why I went into TikTok, even to the extent of my master's researching that, was because I had a fresh perspective of TikTok because I was not a user of the platform. So everything I could collect for data and reference was pretty organic, and I didn't have anything that I had preference for with TikTok or even an understanding that could, sort of stain the quality of the research thereof and the output altogether. And so I decided to hone into strategy for other brands for TikTok, but not myself. And then unfortunately, in my current role, I kind of had to have a TikTok. And when I learned that, I was like, okay, let me quickly open a TikTok and start posting. And so that's how I ended up on TikTok. And I guess some of those videos that also had their viral moment, it became TikTok to me. I never really saw them as, a community, the three platforms, just putting them together. They sort of existed as their own little platforms. And I think this is also, the audiences are very different. The things I post on, they're also very different. So I kept YouTube as YouTube, Instagram as Instagram, and TikTok as TikTok. But obviously here and there where I could, promote like some content, especially brand content, I would drive some traffic in between. But I've always separated the three.
That is so interesting because, obviously the simplest thing to do would just be to cross-post everything. Obviously, you can't do that with YouTube, but if you were kind of chopping up your YouTubes into like short-form videos, just cross-post everything. But that makes a lot of sense because, I don't know, I'm when I'm on TikTok and I'm on Instagram, the goal is different. And my mindset is different on those platforms. So I'd be interested to know how you kind of, something happens and you're like, right, that's TikTok content, that's Instagram content. How do you like bridge the divide, if that makes any sense?
I think for me, what helped with that was different brand deals, right? And working with different brands who themselves had different preferences. So I found that with working with many brands from the Asian market, mainly China market and Hong Kong, that market was more into YouTube. Right? When I compare it with working with brands that are mainly in the States, they were more interested in Instagram and kind kind of interested in YouTube, and then I know with the South African market, usually, and I know this is because there's always a third party involved between the brand and, the content creator and the influencer, usually an agency, and they would have prepackaged briefs and try to sell, I guess, the best deal or, outcome for the brand, the client. And for them, that looked like all the platforms packaged into one thing. And so I got exposed to only creating for YouTube, only creating for Instagram, and then having this new interesting way where I had to sort of cross post. And this is because some brand guidelines and I guess the advice as well from agency was, so client wants you to put that on TikTok and on Instagram. They're not even saying change the video. They're saying just put it out there on everything, right? And so having had the exposure for the YouTube preference, Instagram, and the TikTok preference, I think it sort of taught me how to then also apply it, I guess, outside of my brand with other brands as well, learning how to only create for this platform, learning how to only create for that platform, because the algorithms as well were different. And I also learned to segment those audiences. They were very different audiences. So it was like, okay, they're not even cousins, they're neighbors. Treat them different. They're just on the same street, but they're neighbors. Yeah.
So
I guess that's what helped.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'd love to know, like, just if you can talk through some very specific, I mean, this is purely like for my own interest. I'm deeply fascinated by how you approach this, but like, what is TikTok content versus what is, I mean, I understand with YouTube, there's, like the longer form, the more like conversational vlogs, like talk to camera stuff. But with the difference between TikTok and Instagram, what is the difference for you? What kind of content goes where?
So I think I'm not even going to answer this from my brand, because I think my brand sort of at some point got consumed by so much branded content that everything just became cross-platform, to the extent where organic TikTok content sort of suffered and organic Instagram content suffered. But that's why I'm not going to even answer from that perspective, but from a social media manager and creative strategist perspective, where having to, put together content for a brand who's on two different platforms. So what I did learn, and I guess it will differ from brand to brand, and the tone of voice and the audience that we are speaking to on the different platforms will really sort of direct the content you host on there. Because I know with TikTok, what I did learn was it is a very casual, informal, you're saying to people, hi, bestie. Doesn't matter how serious the brand is, you could be, I don't know, like space, like a space aircraft company, and you'll be saying, hi, bestie, because it's TikTok, and you also qualified to also, I guess, put out some memes and very, casual and humorous things, so it's very lighthearted, and there's a lot of humor and a lot of sarcasm, and I want to say spiciness as well, and I say spiciness using, let's say, Nando's as an example, their tone of voice and how they speak. They're very South African. They're very spicy South African. We know for sure that if Nando's was a person, they would have a South African ID card. They are very direct, like South Africans. They have the South African tone of voice, the sarcasm, the colloquial terms, etc., and they can get away with that because that's their brand. But some brands, I learned that on Instagram, you're going to have to conduct yourself a certain way and address that audience in a certain way. And that, for me, was always directed by the audience. So I had to frequently segment the audience over time. And this doesn't look like understanding the audience for a year. This is seasonal as well, because you're talking maybe quarterly. Because the audience does migrate into a different group sometimes, and some leave, some come, some go. Again, it depends on the brand that you're, writing for or creating content for. So I definitely learned that, Instagram is Instagram, TikTok is TikTok. Memes, we're not going to bring that onto Instagram. We're going to keep them on TikTok. The spicy, we're going to keep that on TikTok, However, with Instagram, I want to say it is also casual, but it's not as lighthearted and authentic as TikTok. It's more, there has to be some, it must be fixed. There are some aesthetics to consider over here. Things need to sort of align, how you speak, how you're engaging. There's some maths over there and some science. Whereas with TikTok, the aesthetic didn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. It's more about authenticity. And we even see it in the way the algorithm favors the content on the two platforms. On TikTok, everybody can go viral, whether it is a 4K video or the resolution is at its lowest. As long as the content resonates with the viewer, TikTok is going to send that thing out. Whereas with Instagram, there's some aesthetics to consider. There was a time where if you weren't posting 9:16 for a reel, the algorithm is like, oh, well, they're not listening to my requirements, so I'm not going to put that video out there. And TikTok is not that strict. I feel like, yeah, Instagram, bit strict. TikTok, do whatever you want. And that's where I saw that, okay, we have two different neighbors here.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Thank you for going down the rabbit hole with me. I could talk about this for the next 2 hours, but I'm going to keep things focused. Okay, keep your head in the game. So good segue. You now work as a social media and marketing coordinator. So you're not a full-time creator. I want to give folks like you create, and you also have a full-time job as well. So what does your role involve, and how do you approach creating content that resonates with such a wide audience for a brand?
So I think with the role itself, right? So with being a social media and marketing coordinator, I think the last part anyway is just coordinating, just making sure that everything is happening really, and just making sure. And I want to say I probably stand as the glue between the strategy and the objectives, right? And the theory and the application. So I'm sort of like in between, making sure that what you want, I can put a calculation forward so that it can take place, and actually making sure it takes place. So I think marketing and social media have just been grouped, first of all, into one thing. And those who know, they're not one thing. It's like there is marketing, and social media can be used as, a means for marketing, but social media is not marketing. And I guess also having to educate in that environment, because I'm also tasked with training people within the organization for online presence in general, because within that organization, there are also other environments who also have online presence. So just in facilitating and making sure that the branding and the marketing and the tone and just understanding, the brand and the role that you have in that environment on social media.
Okay, so that's like employee advocacy that's happening, and you're supporting other folks building their brands who also work at the company. Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah, so that's like one element, the training. And then I think the second element I definitely say is content creation in itself. So fortunately, I don't have to create all the time. That would exhaust me, to be honest. I think at some point I did. But fortunately, I have people that I manage who do the content creation I don't want to say for me, but for me, in other words, right, for the brand. And so with them creating content, I actually literally write the content and the scripts. So writing for this platform and actually saying, we're going to use this sound. This is the text. That's the location. This is what you have to say. Preferably wear this. That's the location. Do this at that time. So I'm literally writing the script for every piece of content you see out there. Amazing. But I'm not creating it. But sometimes I have to, because, life happens sometimes.
I feel like you are.
And honestly, it does feel that way. Yeah. So it's that role as well. So the writing and the creative strategy over there. And then I guess just in general, the marketing side of it, but from a social media perspective, and just bridging the gap over there for corporate affairs anyways, and not really externally, but more internally. So I think in a nutshell, those are probably the three hats that I'd say I put on every day or so. Yeah. As a coordinator.
That is a lot, but that makes sense. I love that you are resourced in that way, because I think a lot of companies, you do work for a very big company, but like a lot of companies will have one person doing all of that. Sometimes even marketing as well, and social media. Mm-hmm. So you're creating, so I work for a company called Buffer. We have a pretty small team as well. So a lot of the time the onus is on our social media manager to, strategize, to script, to create. And that requires such different, it's so much context shifting. It can be really tough. So it's cool that you're able to have that oversight and that big picture view of everything that goes on. I'd imagine that is really, really powerful for the performance of your content.
100%, because, like you're mentioning, always having, small teams, it's just not efficient. I have worked in a small team, and being in a bigger team, it's an exhale moment. You just... Because you're like, how was I doing that beforehand, Right? Because even with the different platforms, in its own, I guess we can also say a social media manager and community manager. I guess it's also what I do, but I don't do it for all the platforms. I do it for 2 specific platforms, and then you have another coordinator doing it for 2 platforms, and another coordinator doing it for the other 2. But then I would assist in the strategy and the content writing and collection and creation for all the platforms, really. So I guess that teamwork also helps with efficiency and consistency, because the demand on social media, you can't just post once a day. So I'm posting like 3 times a day across platform and on stories. And I think it's only made possible because of content creators who assist as well.
Yeah, no, okay. I love that. That makes so much sense. I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. Okay, so in terms of, we've kind of touched on this, but like creating for your own brand, your own kind of personal socials versus kind of all the conceptualization and project management you do for the other brands. Do you sometimes feel, and this is something that I experienced, that I've spent my whole day doing social. I don't want to do any more social for my own personal brand. How do you like get over that hurdle?
100%. I think I'm tired every day. And I know people who are in my personal life who hear me say I'm tired, they don't get what I mean. Like when I say I'm tired, I am tired. Like you said, there's a lot of, and I guess compartments, like mental compartments that you're like opening for the different brands that have a different tone of voice and different objectives, because I'm doing this for, the organization I work with, in addition to my brand and another brand. So I'm thinking 3 ways every single day, and I'm just tired. And I think I myself experience content fatigue, where I'm just like, I don't want to see social media. Just give me a break. Just give me space, And my brand suffers, it suffers at the expense of the other brands that I'm employed for doing well, and it's like, oh, but I don't want mine to suffer. So honestly, and because I'm a creative, I sort of want to have the hold on my content. I want to edit it. I want to film it. I want to do everything. I want to be the team for my own brand, but realistically I cannot, and I realized that. So I did employ for my own brand a videographer and a photographer who are also form a part of my creative team, and we conceptualize together and sort of help my brand not suffer. But I guess it's not that it's not suffering anymore since they've come on board along with me. It's that it's a bit more manageable. And I say more manageable because I still don't have the time. I'm too busy doing things for this brand and this brand. So in as much as there's people helping me over there, the time doesn't really exist for me to still delegate more tasks and time and the actual creating. See, it's with me all the time.
I got the same one.
Awesome. So creating is still a challenge, but I think it's more possible with help. So I've just learned to outsource. I think that's the only thing that's keeping me floating, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I just realized this is actually a podcast and not a video podcast. So Palesa just held up a camera, which is what I got excited about. It's the Sony, right? The
Sony. Mm-hmm. ZV-10.
I literally just bought this. Yep, ZV-10. I couldn't afford the more expensive one.
Love it.
So I got the ZV-10. Yeah, it costs a lot of money, but I'm very happy with the purchase. It's making my content 100%. So much easier to create. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's crisp. It's very crisp.
It's good. You know what changed the game for me? Because I have been filming, sorry, this is another rabbit hole, but I've been filming YouTube videos on my phone. I would imagine you started out the same way. And not being able to, right? Because you can't, and then also you realize, okay, I can't use the front-facing camera, even though it would be really nice to see myself, but that camera quality is a lot lower. So you got to use the back-facing camera. But then you can't see yourself while you're filming. So you don't know, is there something weird going on in the background? I don't know, because the one time I filmed an entire YouTube video, which took me like an hour. And then I had I didn't even know there was this weird ant crawling on my desk at the time. And I had to scrap the entire thing because it's a bloody ant. Anyway, but having the viewfinder, which you can obviously flip around and have that to face you, is the biggest thing. It's not even the camera quality. It's having that viewfinder. That is
game changer. Mm-hmm. That's so real. I want to see what I'm filming, and whether the camera's recording. Very important.
Oh my gosh. Whether the microphone is connected. I've also had to scrap entire videos because my mic wasn't on the entire time.
That is so frustrating. Oh my gosh, I know the feeling. I'm not recording at all.
Yeah. I'm never recording a TikTok again.
Yeah, it's so disheartening, honestly.
It is. Oh no, I know that feeling. Okay, well, while we're going down this little path, I would love it if you could give, I know a lot of people listening to this are probably like, I'm a busy marketer, but I really do want to be active on social. I want to explore being a creator. Where would you advise that they start if they wanted to start building a personal brand like the one you have?
Oh, it's a very interesting question and a bit difficult to answer, because I think why it's so challenging for me to answer this in like one way is because
Sure.
for me, the journey was the other way. Like I was already in social, I guess casually and as a hobby and just for fun. And then I professionalized it. And I also had the support of what I studied that allowed me to, practice the theory, in other words. So, but at the end of the day, I think the one thing that I would have in common with anyone who wants to do that and actually pursue social media as the brand themselves and not for client is the passion, right? I can be so exhausted, and I mean utterly exhausted, which I am like 7 out of 10 times every day, because this is what I do Monday to Sunday, literally. But I still have the zeal and the passion for my brand because I like content for myself. I don't just like it for that brand, And I guess learning how to switch off for that brand and switch on for your own brand, right? Because you need to be able to show up for yourself. You cannot constantly show up for other brands at the expense of your own brand. And that alone talks to time management. And it also talks to investing, So I had to eventually invest in having a team to support me do this, because I absolutely couldn't bear the thought of my brand suffering, because I have to professionalize this thing and I have other organizations that are relying on me. It's like, great, but they're still me and I'm going to take care of me regardless, And so that's a thing I prioritized. And sometimes that does look like a budget. That does look like saving for it and investing time into it. Because if the passion is not there, you're not going to do anything. That's the truth, because it's so easy to procrastinate for yourself because you have other, tasks and obligations that, your employer of choice requires from your side. And so I think you have to sit down and have a meeting with yourself. Take leave of absence just for one day and have a meeting with yourself and actually find out what you want. And the same way you would put a strategy together as a marketer for the brand, put one together for your own brand, And this will also, I think it's also time for self-awareness. You'll be aware of whether or not you actually want to do this, or if it was just, a little thoughts that was passing by and the idea of it seemed like something good. But again, it's about being realistic, because I know many people don't have the time to do everything. And there are some people who have that time because we don't have the same lives. That's another thing, because when I compare my life to many other people doing what I'm doing, even in my workplace, they have families and they're raising kids, they have spouses that they have to be responsible for, a household to keep in order, and etc., etc. I don't have half of that. So I'm afforded the time to sort of, do that and sort of eat up my youth in that way. But even with that being said, as a very busy person, I know that you're never too busy. You can always make time. Even the busiest people make time to take a nap. They make time to go and buy some groceries because they don't feel like check is 60 today. They want to go and touch the bread with their own hands, I just know that being busy is not an excuse. Exhaustion is also not an excuse, because I am tired. I'm very busy, but my brand always comes first. And that comes from passion, so it's about cultivating that passion and turning it into something tangible so you can scroll and see it yourself, That's honestly my point of truth. Like, sit down with yourself and have a meeting and figure it out, because you definitely have the time and the energy. If you can scroll for 4 hours unprovoked, mindlessly, you definitely have the time,
I
Think
love
about
that you
it.
made that point. I love that, because I found that I had and I did it for an article that I was working on for a blog post. So that was like my driving force, but I created consistently every single day for TikTok for an entire month. It was exhausting. I didn't know what I was doing. But I also found that because I was so short on time, I didn't scroll at all. I wasn't consuming any content. I was just making content. So I was basically just getting on TikTok and then getting off TikTok as soon as I could, as soon as the thing was posted. And that's kind of where I really like having the ability to schedule my content. So I don't even have to go on the platform to be on the platform, which is really cool. Okay. So the next thing I have to ask you is,
just before you ask, can I just add on that, actually, because you just gave me, I had a little brain fart and hold on. This is actually good, because you know how you mentioned posting and leaving. I actually did find that a sacrifice I had to make, in the name of time. I had to give up that mindless scrolling for creating, and creating authentically as well, and not creating in a way that, oh, my vlog is not as good as her vlog. Oh, why didn't I think of that first? When we scroll too much, it sort of poisons our creativity as well, and what we actually want to
Yes.
post, because you start comparing yourself, you start comparing, oh, I don't have a camera, and it just breeds procrastination and comparison. And comparison kills, and it's also a thief of time. Scrolling mindlessly really does it. You can change your mind about so many things in 2 seconds, all because of a TikTok video. And it's a sacrifice I think I made, because I was conscious of the fact that I started comparing my content, and I was like, okay, I have to make the choice: unfollow and stop scrolling, and create. Be the creator. People are trying to consume. Don't consume until you've mastered the art of creating for yourself without comparing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yes, yes, yes to all of it. I think you have kind of just like sparked something in me. I've really been feeling like very sluggish with my own personal brand now. Of course, I have nothing near the reach that you have. But like it is also really important for me, I think, as a marketer, especially. So my primary platform is LinkedIn. And honestly, video on LinkedIn is unbelievable right now. But that suffers when I have to, when I'm focused on my work, right? Because that pays the bills. I don't, earn an income from social. I don't monetize really. Yeah, but I think that like that little light switch about like not scrolling, sitting down and like having a meeting with yourself, treating your brand like a brand that you're working on, not just like random posting. You've really flicked something on for me now, and I feel like very motivated. So thank you, Palesa.
Amazing. I'm so happy for you, Kirsty. We look forward to your content.
Yay, more content.
No
everybody,
pressure.
The thing
No
everybody's
pressure.
been waiting for.
Yeah,
okay.
no pressure. You've got
question.
this. Yeah.
Oh, bless you. Last question. What is one thing that you wish you had known before you started as working as a marketer? So not specifically as a creator, but as a marketer. What is one thing you wish you'd known?
As a marketer, I have to think. A marketer for whom? Because I'm also a marketer for my own brand and other brands.
Fair. You know what? Let's remove the caveats. What is one thing that you wish you'd known before you started working?
Honestly, I wish I had a me. Like, teach me and train me. I think people underestimate the power of knowledge and knowledge sharing, because I have been a guinea pig in every regard for other brands and for my own brand. I never really had, and I think creators today are so fortunate because they have this. You actually have content creators, not influencers, but content creators with the aim of educating people on best practice and how to do this, how to start, how to sustain, how to cultivate. I never had that. I got into content at a time where the word influencer was not even there here in SA. So like I'm like an oldie content creator who just had to figure things out as they went along. And I think from my experience, I was then able to pour into people, whether as an industry mentor or whether in training and in the best practice that I would apply in the way that I was writing the strategies and just putting content together, just never educating myself, or I guess using the resources I gave people, using them for myself. I wish I did that differently, because I feel like I would have saved myself so much time and screen time, because I was working very hard, not smart, and so I think for me, the one thing I wish I did differently was working smart, not working too hard, because I've inherited bags, designer bags, of course, but bags under my eyes as a result of that and bad sleeping patterns, so I think just working smart as a marketer. There are actually resources out there, and resources beyond scrolling, right? Because I think sometimes people think as a marketer, I have to stay on trends, and trends only exist packaged as a TikTok video, packaged as Lizzie McGuire, right? and that's like, no. You see how I'm talking in trends right now? That's not the point, It's actually amazing, and I have to hop onto it actually, but yeah, conversation for another day. But even with trends, I learned that they exist beyond TikTok and Instagram Reels. As an academic researcher, because I still do write and research as an academic, because I really do believe in the theory and application of everything. So in as much as I am in this field that's very, practical, I still do get my research and findings and back up everything I do by academic research and I still conduct and research and study further for that. And I learned that the things I've taken there and packaged into my strategies have actually done a lot for me than a TikTok trend did. So it's like education exists beyond videos. Articles are out there as well. Newsletters are out there as well. LinkedIn, mwah, love LinkedIn. I learned so much on there. And I think it's helping me work smarter as well, connecting with marketers and just engaging in conversation and not working in a silo and scrolling mindlessly, because that's hard work, not smart work. So it's definitely the smart work. That's the takeout.
Okay, I love that because you have segued me perfectly into my outro. So thank you so much for making the time today, Palesa. That was such an energizing conversation. I'm feeling so good and excited and just invigorated about my own brands. And I'm definitely going to go and follow you on YouTube as well. Where can people find you? So you're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Where's the best place?
So it's interesting. It depends why you want to connect with me. That's what I would say. So if you want to connect as a marketer, I would definitely say LinkedIn, because that's the professional platform. And honestly, it's my only professional platform, because there's Palesa and then there's my brand. Those are two separate entities, and Palesa's only on LinkedIn. My brand is on TikTok and Instagram. And Palesa and my brand, OG Parley, they coexist. Healthy relationship there on YouTube. So you can also find me on YouTube. So that's OG Parley on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and then Palesa Ramafola on LinkedIn. And yeah, I guess for more professional things, we'll definitely leave that on LinkedIn. If you're just trying to be human and just engage in content and, just connect beyond the world of what we're doing for clients, those are the other platforms.
Okay, that is perfect. Now, speaking of community and connecting, if you are looking to connect with marketers like me or Palesa, we would love to have you in the SA Tech Marketers community. It is a Slack space for learning, sharing, and finding new opportunities. You'll find the link in the show notes. Palesa, it has been a delight. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much, Christy, for having me. And to all the listeners, thank you for tuning in. Listen to more of these. This is so interesting. I'm going to become a listener as well. Yeah.